My name is Chris O'Leary, Christopher Kevin O'Leary, and I'm a survivor of the Catholic sex abuse crisis. As Sinead O'Connor tried to warn Americans about the Catholic sex abuse crisis long before Spotlight, before things were new, I'm going to try to return the favor for the people of Ireland and make sure that you're aware, warned of a problem with the Catholic sex abuse crisis, which is going to end up in your own backyard. So, I was abused here at the Church of the Immacolata in Richmond Heights, Missouri, just up the hill from the Galleria Mall, if you know St. Louis. So I was abused by a priest named Father LeRoy Valentine, late 70s, early 80s. From 77 to 81. For 2 years, from the summer of 1977 to the summer of 1979, Father Valentine worked with, lived with, then Father, now Cardinal Timothy Dolan, the Archbishop of New York, the man who's running for Pope. I don't know any other way to put it than to say that Cardinal Dolan is running for Pope. And as part of that effort to run for Pope, Cardinal Dolan is traveling to Ireland, to Northern Ireland, to Armagh. I don't know if it's Armagh or Armagh, sorry. I'm living in St. Louis, the land of mispronounced French names, so it's hard for me to know how to pronounce things correctly, much less an Irish name. My French, sadly, is better than my Irish, my Gaelic. But so I was abused by Father LeRoy Valentine, abuse that was witnessed, at least in part, by then Father, now Cardinal Timothy Dolan, the Archbishop of New York, the potential next Pope, which makes it really difficult for me. It makes me feel like I need to warn the people of Ireland, the people of Northern Ireland, about the problem that Cardinal Dolan represents. My abuse was witnessed, at least in part, by Cardinal Dolan, who lived and worked with Father LeRoy Valentine for 2 years here at Immacolata. The really difficult thing about my experience and my abuse is knowing how small Immacolata is, how small the sacristy is behind the church, and this is the church here, and the sacristy is that kind of lower building. You've got the church here, and then the sacristy is behind it, and just beyond that is the rectory. The really difficult thing about my abuse is knowing how little effort Father Valentine made to hide my and our sexual abuse as children from the other priests at Immacolata, Monsignor Flavin, then Father, now Cardinal Timothy Dolan. Now, well, there are horrible aspects to my story, one of which is that within days of school starting, basically this time of the year, 1977, Mrs. Glarner went to Sister Helen and said, hey, we've got a problem with this Father Valentine guy. There's something wrong with this Father Valentine guy. Sister Helen was ordered by Monsignor Flavin to keep her mouth shut about it. I have to assume the same is true of then Father, now Cardinal Timothy Dolan. They knew who and what Father LeRoy Valentine was, and they kept their mouths shut, just following orders, just as the Nazis did. And Sister Helen has used that Nazi just following order defense to me when I went to her for help in 2018 trying to understand what happened. But so this is the rectory at Immacolata. You had 3 priests living in there at the time. Father LeRoy Valentine, Monsignor Flavin, and then Father, now Cardinal Timothy Dolan. And it's really surprising, it's really stunning how little effort Father Valentine went to hide his efforts, to hide his abuse from the other priests in the rectory. We were abused in the rectory during risk and pizza parties in the rectory. I'll show you the kitchen of Immacolata. There's people around, and they don't like me walking around. I get dirty looks when I walk around the campus of Immacolata, so I have to be careful. But Father Valentine, he would host. We didn't start serving till 5th grade. So one way that Father Valentine got at the younger kids, aside from, initially through face-to-face confession, where he would have his hands all over you during face-to-face confession, assuming my abuse didn't start in the fall of 1977, it certainly had started by November 1977 when Father Valentine invited me and 3 other guys over, AM, RB, and TM. He had us over to the rectory here at Immacolata, and we played Risk and ate pizza. I don't know if it was Chanella's pizza or what, but it's basically this corner, this closest corner right here is the kitchen at Immacolata. One of the difficult things about that is knowing that Risk and Pizza Party was held while Monsignor Flavin and then Father, now Cardinal Timothy Dolan, were also in the rectory. I know they were there because I saw them there. They saw what was going on, and I, mine wasn't the only Risk and Pizza Party held in the rectory at Immacolata. Father LeRoy Valentine was running a parade of guys through the rectory here at Immacolata, the school behind me. Monsignor Flavin knew. I know Monsignor Flavin knew because Sister Helen told Monsignor Flavin what Mrs. Glarner had told Sister Helen. Everybody knew, including then Father, now Cardinal Timothy Dolan. I didn't know Dolan super well. He spent most of his time with the older servers. I know I served for him at least once, holding the book for Father Dolan. When the priest says, "Let us pray," that's when the right-hand altar server, usually there are 3 of us, the guy in the right seat of Father grabs the big book. I didn't know Dolan super well because he tended to get the older priests or the older servers when Dolan was a priest. I would have been a 5th grader, so it would have been a little unusual for a 5th grader to serve for Dolan. He got more 7th graders, 8th graders, guys who wouldn't screw up, guys he didn't have to coach too hard. I know I did serve for Dolan at least once. So in 2002, so one thing to understand about my story is that my story is basically a sequel to the movie Spotlight. January 2002, the articles run in the Boston Globe. In response to that, the New York Times started their own Spotlight series and ran an article, "Two Paths, No Easy Solution to Abusive Priests," in which they named Father LeRoy Valentine, my favorite priest and one of the favorite people in the world, as an abuser, which prompted me to call the Archdiocese of St. Louis, and lo and behold, by then, Auxiliary Bishop Timothy Dolan called me back. "Hey Chris, Tim Dolan, Bishop Dolan. Been a long time. How you doing?" If you know Dolan, you know his rap. You know how he does his hail hearty fellow rap. So this is very early March 2002, I had a conversation with then Auxiliary Bishop Dolan, told him what I remembered about Father LeRoy Valentine, and basically said, what in the world, what are the and I was just as flustered. what are they saying about Father Valentine? Is there any way that the stuff that they're saying about Father Valentine could be true? I was obviously very concerned about what was being said about Father Valentine. I was very confused about what was being said about Father Valentine. I didn't understand how it could be true, but I didn't understand how the New York Times could have run a piece without believing that what was being said about Father Valentine was true. I got all these people Immaculata's crawling with people all of a sudden. I don't know if they're going to look at me or not. I'm walking past the school. But so I told Bishop Dolan what I remembered from my time at Immacolata. I didn't have any memories from the school here, but I did have memories from the rectory here. This is the rectory at Immacolata. This corner here is where the Riskin Pizza Party was, where the kitchen of Immacolata is. So that's the rectory at Immacolata. And it's not, it's needless to say, it's not easy for me to be up here. This is the gym, the old church. That's where Father Valentine first would abuse people during the after-school program. But so in early March 2002, I told then Bishop Dolan what I remembered, which included the Riskin Pizza Party, and then here's the church here, and see that little window just right here. That's the cry room in the church. That's where they would hold face-to-face confession. I told Bishop Timothy Dolan, about my odd experiences with Father LeRoy Valentine in there. Basically, Valentine would be very handsy. Well, and the way face-to-face confession was set up is that it was the cry room. They would close the curtains and everything. They don't have curtains on there anymore, thank God. But they would close the curtains, and it was like 3 layers of curtains. I guess for weddings, so you could seal it off if someone wanted to prepare there. Not that anybody ever gets married in Immacolata. Get in my car and turn on the air conditioner. But so I talked to Bishop Dolan. I told him a set of memories. I told him about face-to-face confession. I told him about the Riskin Pizza Party. I told him about a mud cave trip that Valentine took me on, and me and a couple other guys, PP and AB. And then I told Dolan about what I refer to as special training, which happened in the sacristy that I showed you. And I've got one of these paintings back here is the painting of the special training. And Dolan immediately, without any investigation, said, no, none of this means anything. And Dolan told me, God damn it. Dolan told me I lived with LeRoy Valentine. I was in the seminary with him. I lived and worked with him at Immacolata. I know that LeRoy Valentine didn't do any of the things that he's accused of. I know that LeRoy Valentine could never do anything to hurt a child. Which was good enough for me. I've got Bishop freaking Dolan, who's obviously on the cardinal path, telling me nothing happened in early March 2002. Now, Dolan did refer me to a quote-unquote independent psychologist. She turned out to be the assistance coordinator for the Archdiocese of St. Louis, a woman, I believe, named Nancy Brown. She also gave me a clean bill of health. This quote-unquote independent psychologist gave me a clean bill of health. She said that I was just quote-unquote misinterpreting what Valentine was doing or what he was intending. Misinterpreting was the word that she used, and that stuck with me. What I didn't know is that at the same time I was coming forward and Dolan was giving me a clean bill of health and telling me my memories didn't mean anything, is at least 2 other guys had come forward. So I was really the second guy. The first person to come forward was John Scorfina, who came forward in the New York Times article, March 2nd, 2002, Two Paths, No Easy Solution on Abusive Priests by Goodstein and Wilgerin. I came forward in early March 2002. Another guy came forward basically in the same time. What happened is the New York Times piece ran. That led the local press to jump on the story. And so within like the 5th or 6th of March 2002, I was talking to then Bishop, now Cardinal Timothy Dolan, who then gave me a clean bill of health. What's weird is that I was the second allegation against Valentine, Scorfina being the first, and Scorfina is named in the New York Times article. There are actually 3 Scorfina brothers named in the New York Times article. So then I was the second. There was a third guy who came forward in early March 2002, and then a fourth guy came forward at the end of March 2002. So by the end of March 2002, then Auxiliary Bishop Timothy Dolan had 4 allegations against Father LeRoy Valentine in his pocket. Allegations of child sexual abuse. Which then, understandably prompted him and Cardinal Regali, to ask for Valentine's resignation. So they removed Father LeRoy Valentine at the end of March 2002 without my knowledge and without ever circling back to me. Dolan removed Father LeRoy Valentine in the end of March 2002 in the aftermath of Spotlight without ever getting back to me. So I just went on with my life. Clean bill of health from both Cardinal Dolan and an independent psychologist. And I got sick. 2003 had a panic attack. 2005 had a panic attack. By 2007 I'd been laid off from my job. Had no idea what was going on because Cardinal Dolan had given me a clean bill of health. Cardinal freaking Dolan had given me a clean bill of health. That's not the only contribution Dolan makes to my story. So in May 2011, after basically a 10-year wild goose chase, I went back to the Archdiocese of St. Louis after having been in therapy and starting to wonder if my Valentine stories did in fact mean anything. That's a whole nother story, but what I will say, the way Dolan gets involved in that story is that, so I met with a review team from the Archdiocese of St. Louis in May 2011. And in part of that process, I told them about my conversation with then Bishop, now Cardinal Timothy Dolan, in March 2002, and my conversation with the quote-unquote independent psychologist in like middle March 2002. And the Archdiocese of St. Louis said, "We have no idea what you're talking about. We have no record of your conversations with Cardinal Dolan. We have no records of your conversation with a psychologist. We have no idea what you're talking about." Which actually upset me enough that you want to talk about gaslighting. That's what gaslighting was and what it does to you. And what that gaslighting feeling did to me was it led me to drive to downtown Clayton from the Regali Center on Hanley. I just drove up Hanley into downtown Clayton and went looking for where I believed the building was. And the strangest thing is I drove past that building like 20 times and I literally could not see it. And it would be another, and I drove by it over the next 5 years. I drove by it another 80 times. So I've driven by this building like 100 times from 2011 to 2016. Drove by it 100 times, literally could not see the building. And then in 2016, January or February, I drove by it and I could finally see the building. Something clicked. I don't know what it was. I was in the middle of a lawsuit. And suddenly I could see that building. That was the building. That was the building of the independent psychologist that Cardinal Dolan had referred me to, that he sent me to. That's where the office was of the woman that I talked to. who I assume was Nancy Brown, the assistant coordinator for the Archdiocese of St. Louis. All of which is a long way of saying Cardinal Dolan is a really, really nasty guy. I know the Catholic sex abuse crisis was a complete disaster for Ireland. What you need to understand is that it was just as much of a disaster in St. Louis. It just hasn't been covered. It's just as bad in the United States. It just hasn't been covered as well. There may be 1 million survivors like me in the United States, but they haven't been covered. In large part, the Catholic sex abuse crisis in the United States and St. Louis hasn't been covered because of the work of men like Timothy Cardinal Dolan, the Archbishop of New York, the potential next pope, the man who's running for pope. What he did to me and to us in the late 70s at Immacolata, and then what he did again to me and to us. And I know there were at least 3 of us who contacted Dolan in March 2002 in the aftermath of Spotlight. The gaslighting, manipulation, that whole thing that Dolan did to us. You know, and then the worst part is that the Archdiocese of St. Louis has actually committed perjury to, I have to assume, to try to protect Cardinal Dolan, to protect Cardinal Dolan's bid for Pope. In January 2014, there was civil litigation, and the Archdiocese of St. Louis committed perjury via a document referred to as the Matrix. And that perjury was committed, I have to assume, in order to try to protect Cardinal Dolan. The Archdiocese of St. Louis, long story short, has admitted, okay, yeah, Valentine was a bad guy. We permanently removed him. But the narrative the Archdiocese of St. Louis is trying to shape in order to protect Cardinal Dolan is that, okay, yes, Valentine was bad, but he didn't start offending and abusing people until after 82, by which time Dolan was in D.C. or Rome or something. That's a lie. It's a complete bald-faced lie. And I hope the people of Ireland, the people of Northern Ireland, the Catholics, and everybody in Ireland and Northern Ireland sees this and uses it to understand who Timothy Cardinal Dolan is. Timothy Cardinal Dolan is not a Irish boy done good. Timothy Cardinal Dolan is the worst example of the Catholic sex abuse crisis. He is to use my French, he's a collaborateur. Timothy Cardinal Dolan saw and turned a blind eye to my and our sexual abuse by Father LeRoy Valentine here at the Church of the Immacolata when we were children. And Dolan, instead of doing something about it, instead of going to the police, Dolan instead kept his mouth shut because he knew that it would be great for his career.